Key talks are set for Tuesday between U.S. government officials and House representatives to avoid a default on over $31 trillion of U.S. debt for the first time in history. And Indonesia is gearing up to host the ASEAN summit with the aim of promoting the region's agility and stability. Hello and welcome to this edition of Global Business on CGTN. I'm Guanxin in Beijing. First up in the program, China's foreign exchange reserves rose for a second consecutive month in April, driven in part by the falling value of the US dollar index. And this has led to a rise in the value of non-dollar currencies and related assets. Additionally, China has been adding to its gold reserves for 6 straight months, following the footsteps of central banks around the world who are expanding their holdings of bullion amidst increasing geopolitical and economic uncertainties. The yuan became the most widely used currency for cross-border transactions in China in March, overtaking the dollar for the first time. Cross-border payments and receipts in yuan rose to a record $549.9 billion in March, from $434.5 billion a month earlier, according to data from the State Administration of Foreign Exchange. The yuan was used in 48.4% of all cross-border transactions, Reuters calculated, while the dollar's share declined to 46.7% from 48.6% a month earlier. The volume of cross-border transactions covers both the current and capital accounts. China has long been promoting the use of yuan to settle cross-border trades as part of its efforts to internationalize the use of its currency. Since the beginning of this year, many countries have been reducing their holdings of U.S. debt. Data released by the U.S. Treasury Department showed that China's holdings of U.S. treasuries fell nearly $11 billion to almost $849 billion in February, the lowest level since June 2010. It was also the 7th consecutive month of decline. Meanwhile, Japan, the largest overseas holder of U.S. treasuries, pared its holdings by about $23 billion to $1.1 trillion. Several central banks have also reduced their U.S. dollar holdings. According to IMF data, as of the fourth quarter of 2022, the share of dollar reserves held by central banks fell to 58%, the lowest level in more than 20 years. Analysts say the Fed's tightening of monetary policy, global economic dynamics, geopolitical risks, and other factors are prompting countries to reduce the use of the U.S. dollar. Meanwhile, de-dollarization moves are gaining momentum, with more than 60 countries adopting various measures to reduce their exposure to the U.S. currency. In this episode of BizBeat, our Hou Jing explains what is happening to the greenback and what brought it here.
Dollar, dollarization, and de-dollarization. It seems that today the US dollar is undergoing the third phase of its evolution in the global environment. BizBeat, the insight you need. In this episode, we'll take a closer look at what exactly is happening to this global currency and what are the real reasons behind it. Entering 2023, de-dollarization is gaining momentum. In January, Brazil and Argentina, the two biggest economies in South America, announced that they have been preparing for a common currency called the SUR. At the end of March, Brazil signed an agreement with China about the use of local currencies for bilateral trade. Meanwhile, Malaysia recently agreed to trade with India with the Indian rupee. The country's prime minister also reproposed the idea to establish an Asian monetary fund, saying that China was open to discussing plans to revive a structure that would reduce dependency on the US dollar. Examples showing a growing trend of de-dollarization are not only seen in the developing economies. A historical moment was witnessed this March when France Total Energies, the world's fourth largest oil company, completed the first yuan-settled LNG trade with one of China's state oil companies. Recently, former U.S. President Donald Trump posted on his Truth social media platform, saying, quote-unquote, China is trying to displace the US dollar as the #1 currency throughout the world. This is not the truth, Mr. Trump. According to SWIFT's most recent report, the Chinese yuan retained the 5th most active currency for global payments by value, with a share of 2.19%. Correspondingly, the US dollar was 41.1%. The euro was 36.43%, the pound was 6.58%, and the Japanese yen was 2.98%. And according to some statistics, more than 60 countries have adopted various measures of de-dollarization. What hurts the U.S. currency's global position is actually the weaponized dollar itself. U.S. policymakers hiked rates 9 times consecutively from March last year. According to the UN Conference on Trade Development, it is estimated that each percentage point increase in the Fed's push to hike interest rates would lower the economic output of other rich countries by 0.5% and in less developed countries by 0.8% over the next 3 years. That is because a strong dollar makes it more expensive for other countries to import essential goods like food and fuel. And the more important reason for these countries' initiatives of de-dollarization is the fear that U.S. could someday use the power of U.S. currency to target them the way it has sanctioned Russia. Actually, earlier, an IMF top official has warned of a decrease in the U.S. currency's dominance in global market after imposing sanctions on Russia. If the dollar becomes a seriously dangerous weapon to threaten a country's survival, how can one still choose to use it?
To understand more about why the de-dollarization trend continues, we're joined by John Gong, Vice President of Research and Strategy at the University of International Business and Economics in Israel. Well, thank you for joining us, Professor Gong. So in your opinion, why has China been decreasing its ownership of U.S. treasuries in recent times?
Well, I think fundamentally it has to do with protecting the value of China's foreign exchange reserve. I think Bank of China, which is primarily charged of the responsibility to manage this pile of money, a lot of money, $3 trillion of China's national wealth is resting mostly with Bank of China. They're doing a wonderful job of protecting the value. In a climate of interest rate increase, the yields on bonds actually decreasing, and the value of bond holdings is also dropping. So I think this the task, the phase of gradually reducing dollar holdings actually started way before the interest rate rise. In other words, they're already preparing for this. And if you look at the holdings number, it's been steadily decreasing in the last, I would say, almost 10 years, 8 or 9 years so far. The highest I can remember is probably in 2014 when the foreign exchange reserve in the U.S. Treasury is over, I think it's $1.3 trillion. Now it's only about a little bit over $800 billion. So, it has dropped a lot. I think the second reason is something you've already mentioned in your program. That is, the concern that, in the larger context of Sino-U.S. competition, we don't want to get too much exposure of our national holdings invested in U.S. Treasury bills, because there's always the risk of subject to some kind of a sanction, as your program has pointed out. Something happened similarly to what happened to Russia, and this is something we have to be prepared with.
Well, Professor Gong, China is not alone. Many countries have also reduced their exposure to the U.S. dollar to some extent. In your opinion, what is driving the trend towards de-dollarization, and how is it impacting the global economy?
Well, first of all, let me say that the concept de-dollarization is indeed happening. I'm not disputing with that, but I think it's the pace of this isn't probably as fast as a lot of people expect. It's happening. It's happening gradually, and I think it's also happening probably marginally as well. I think a couple of fundamental economics reasons, other than the political reasons we've just talked about. The fundamental reason is that the United States economy, trade related to the United States as a percentage of the total global trade has been steadily coming down. Today, China is the world's largest trading nation. Foreign exchange is primarily used as a settlement currency. Dollar is used as settlement currency for trade. And as the United States trade, as a percentage of total global trade, is coming down, so naturally, there's there's a possibility that these transactions, trade transactions, can be done in currencies other than the U.S. dollar. I think this is a very, very important phenomenon. Other things happening right now, I think, because of interest rate rise, many countries' current account, the balance of payment situation is worsening. So there's a need to use other currencies in spite of the dollar is a very popular currency. And also, I think, for countries like China, we are actually signing those bilateral currency swap agreements with several countries, and many of which are major raw material exporting countries, particularly in the area of oil exports. We have an agreement with Saudi Arabia, and this concept about petro-yuan in addition to a petrodollar. I won't say right now in displacement of US dollar, a petrodollar, but I think at least in addition to a petrodollar, there's also more and more transactions in yuan in the realm of trading oil and other energy products. And I think that's also an important driving force behind the de-dollarization trend.
And Professor Gong, will the push towards the currency multipolarity continue in coming years, and what impact will it have on the global financial system?
Well, in a sense, I think we're already in a multi-currency situation. If you look at a very good example is look at the composition of the special drawing right at the IMF. We have a multi-currency in that basket. In addition to US dollars, also the euro, Chinese yuan, Japanese yen, pound sterling. These currencies are also being used as the part of the basket in the special drawing right. This is already a multi-currency situation. I think what we're really talking about is the percentage or the weight of dollar already in a multi-currency world is going to steadily coming down. I think that's for sure. Particularly in the context of Chinese yuan rising more and more importantly in international transactions, international trade, as well as actually being used as a currency reserve, national currency, reserve currency, exchange reserve currency. I know several countries, especially I think in Southeast Asian countries, are using yuan as a foreign exchange reserve currency.
Thank you very much for sharing with us. That was John Gong, Vice President of Research and Strategy at the University of International Business and Economics in Israel. And now we're heading for a short break. Still to come on the program. Key talks are set for Tuesday between U.S. government officials and House representatives to avoid the default on over $31 trillion of U.S. debt for the first time in history.
.360-degree profiles of industry movers and shakers, tech mavericks, and policymakers. We drill down on their success. We ask how they set strategy and how they navigate in an increasingly competitive market. Real talk, real business. Join the conversation. Biz Talk, only on CGTN.
Now to the U.S. Key talks are set for Tuesday at the White House between U.S. President Biden and congressional leadership of both parties to avoid a default on over $31 trillion of U.S. debt for the first time in history. CGTN's White House correspondent Nathan King has the latest.
Well, the clock is ticking. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has said that the U.S. could run out of its ability to pay some of its debts on the $31 trillion it owes both here and around the world by the 1st of June. Now, the Republicans have said they will not aid the government to raise the debt limit until there are serious negotiations about cutting the budget. The problem is, of course, is that the debt has already been paid for. Essentially, that is stuff that's already been agreed to by Congress. The Republicans are essentially saying, well, we want cuts in the future in return for raising the debt on stuff we already owe. And at the White House this Friday, President Joe Biden said they are not going to do that.
We're not a deadbeat nation. We pay our bills. And some of you cover a lot of foreign policy in other countries. You know this is becoming an issue in other countries. What's the United States going to do? Are they really fooling around with not paying their debts? And so, look, next week I'm going to reiterate to congressional leaders that they should do what every other Congress has done. That is, pass the debt limit, avoid default.
The Republicans passed a bill through the House of Representatives basically saying there will be steep cuts in connection with raising the debt ceiling across programs that are very dear to this White House and they think could hold the key to their re-election.
He's putting the American economy in jeopardy by his lack of action. Now he should sit down and negotiate. We passed this early. We are in April, way ahead of the debt limit. We are the only party to take fiscal action in a sound mind that would lift the debt limit so we wouldn't have economic damage.
Now, while the White House says they won't link the raising of the debt ceiling to cuts in budget for the future and current programs, there is going to be talks here on Tuesday, May 9th. The congressional leaders, both Republican and Democrat, will join with US President Biden in the first meetings that we have seen since this potential crisis begun. Will there be a breakthrough? Well, in past experiences, any indicator, this usually goes down to the wire. So it's probably the first of many back and forth we are going to see for a week. But just remember, the US has never defaulted on its debt before, and it would wobble the financial system. It would hit the US economy very hard. And of course, a lot of foreign companies and countries own the $31 trillion worth of US debt in treasury bills around the world. So it would affect the US global system in terms of its finances, but also the US's reputation and the dollar as well. So much is at stake. And many countries are looking at the US again and saying, why are you playing this brinkmanship over domestic politics? Nathan King, CGTN, just outside the White House.
Warren Buffett, chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, has also commented on U.S. banking crisis. He said the economy gets into trouble if depositors lose confidence.
Bank runs were just part of the picture, and if you have people that are worried about whether their money is safe in the bank and all trying to withdraw it, you can't run an economy very well. So the FDIC was very logical. It's got changed over the years some, but here we are in 2023, and we actually see the FDIC pay off at 100 cents on the dollar to everybody, or make it available on all demand deposits, and yet you still have people very worried about their periodically, geographically, all kinds of crazy ways, and that just shouldn't happen. So the messaging has been very poor. It's been poor by the politicians, who sometimes have an interest in having it poor. It's been poor by the agencies, and I'd say it's been poor by the press.
It's not the first time the U.S. has raised the debt ceiling. As early as 1939, the country passed a law to remove curbs on government debt and set the debt ceiling at an initial limit of $65 billion US. During the next several decades, the U.S. government increased the debt ceiling for over 100 times to support the country's economic development and cushion the fiscal deficit pressure from recession. By the end of 2021, the Congress increased the debt ceiling to $31.4 trillion US. Just 1 year later, the U.S. national debt has approached the limit and was 1.2 times the U.S. GDP of $26 trillion that year. Though these moves are aimed at preventing debt defaults, it has been creating mounting financial obligation for the country's future generation. Moving on to some other headlines that we're tracking at this hour. U.S. President Joe Biden is planning to sign an executive order that will limit U.S. companies' investment in key parts of the Chinese economy. The The move is likely to take place around the G7 summit that starts on May 19th. Across the Atlantic, investor confidence in the Eurozone is dipping. An index published by market research firm Centix fell to minus 13.1 points for May. The survey conducted between May the 4th to May the 6th covered nearly 1,300 investors. Meanwhile, the euro area's economic powerhouse, Germany, saw industrial production decline by 3.4% in March. Analysts say the country's pillar industry is taking an increasing hit from global rate hikes, adding to the risks of a recession. Indonesia is gearing up to host the ASEAN summit with the aim of promoting the region's agility and stability. This year, member nations will focus on laying a strong foundation to face long-term challenges such as the protection of migrant workers and the ongoing crisis in Myanmar. And Arsoka Aluwalia reports from Jakarta.
Indonesia, the largest economy among the ASEAN members, aims to foster collaboration and inclusivity in this year's summit. Leaders will meet and discuss global challenges and progress under the theme of ASEAN Matters, Epicentrum of Growth. Under the theme, leaders will focus on three main pillars, and the purpose is to maintain ASEAN's peace, stability, and growth. The first and second pillar focuses on the member group's centrality. This points to fostering economic growth and financial stability within the ASEAN nations.
And of course, on the epicentrum of growth, this focus on the key priority areas, particularly talk about health priority, food security, energy security, and financial stability. These are the key priorities under this particular topic.
The third pillar is related to the importance of cooperation among neighboring countries.
And then, of course, also the other pillar would be the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific with the four priority areas. Certainly, of course, on maritime cooperation, connectivity, also on the sustainable development goals, and the economic and other areas of cooperation.
Other topics that remain an important point of discussion at the summit will be economic recovery post-pandemic, ASEAN's 2045 vision, and the Myanmar crisis.
This year is a very important year for ASEAN. First, the world is still recovering from the effect of the pandemic, and in some parts of the world it is still becoming a hard challenge to recover. And Southeast Asian region has been the global engine of growth for some time, and it is predicted that this region will be one among the bright spots in the global economy.
Indonesia's leadership will be crucial in laying a strong foundation for ASEAN's long-term growth. And the summit will provide an important platform for member nations to contribute to that growth and shape the future of ASEAN community. Sulkina Aluwalia, CGTN, Jakarta.
Shanghai has seen a healthy boost in consumption since the beginning of the month with the launch of the 2023 International Consumption Season and the fourth Shanghai Double 5 Shopping Festival. The city's consumer market Big Data Lab says that from April 28th to May the 2nd, offline consumption payments in the city came to almost 35 billion yuan, while online consumption was worth close to 25 billion yuan. And Zhang Shixuan has been looking at some new imports now, getting attention from the city's shoppers. Take a look.
Mojito with Cuban rum, Cuban coffee, Cuban sandwich. When it comes to Cuban products, what might top your list? Perhaps coffee or rum? Well, I'm not that familiar with Cuban specialties, so I'm excited to take a look around.
The corner reserved for specialties from Cuba was full of visitors on Friday, when this international import trading center in Shanghai inaugurated its 2-week-long promotion event featuring products from the Caribbean island nation.
Today, I want to buy some honey, coffee, and liquor for 500 or 600 yuan in all.
I have tried most local products, so I want to try something that I've never seen before from outside China.
This importer has brought honey, coffee, and rum from Cuba to the mall. People can scan the QR code and order their products through JD.com's cross-border e-commerce site. Having been in the import business since last April, the company is shooting for its sales to more than double from last year.
For more than 10 years we were just exporting products to Cuba. But since April 2022, we opened an online pavilion on JD.com for imports. 50% of them sold within just 2 days, well beyond our expectations. If consumer goods like alcohol are imported through normal channels, they pay combined taxes of around 50%. But with cross-border e-commerce, it's just around 17%.
This is the first imported goods promotion event hosted this year at this International Import Commodity Exhibition and Trade Center in Shanghai. This month, another cross-border e-commerce shopping spree will be launched here, featuring products from Belt and Road countries.
We've got a lot of overseas clients this year. We've hosted 5 or 6 consuls general who have introduced companies from their countries. Since the International Import Expo last year, a batch of South Korean cosmetics and also healthcare products from South Africa have been imported through cross-border e-commerce. Our bonded warehouse now also handles JD.com, so it's responsible for the largest cross-border e-commerce shipment volume in Shanghai.
Shanghai, along with Beijing, Guangzhou, Tianjin, and Chongqing, have been designated by the Ministry of Commerce as 5 key cities targeted to become international consumption centers. During Shanghai's 2-month import shopping festival that begins this month, some 30 companies will be hosting around 90 special activities. Since the first China International Import Expo 5 years ago, Shanghai has established permanent trading platforms for many CIIE exhibits, which have so far imported more than 323 billion yuan worth of goods. Zhang Shixuan, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
And that would do it for this edition of Global Business here on CGTN. Thank you for being with us. The Point with Liu Xin is coming up next. Stay tuned.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
What happens when one dares to challenge the dominant narratives against China on international media? Maureen Hubel, an independent Australian researcher, knows it well. She has been challenging the relevant authorities in her country